Hey, this is Zulem Urbina, and tune into the relay for the latest news in boxing all around the world. Thank you for supporting myself and other female boxers. We truly appreciate it.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this, some Showtime-related news. Paramount Global CEO Bob Bakish said it no longer makes sense to run the company's Showtime Premium Cable Network as a standalone operation.
What the fuck's that mean?
I want you guys to understand that for us boxing fans, this is less about Paramount, less about more Americans cutting the cord, and more about how this affects Showtime's boxing programming. The head of Paramount Global said it no longer makes sense to run its Showtime Premium Cable Network as a standalone operation, citing growing financial pressure on the TV industry. Chief Executive Officer Bob Bakish said at an investor conference Tuesday that Paramount is looking to consolidate economics at Showtime and how to unlock synergy between the channel and the consumer. The way the average American consumes content these days is changing, not dissimilar from the transition we saw from 8-track tapes to cassette tapes to CDs to MP3s to music streaming platforms. That same transition applies to television and media. The experience is a lot more customized these days, tailor-made for the consumer, and the average consumer only wants to pay for what they actually watch. Thus, a lot of well-established channels, like Showtime, for example, they're feeling the pinch. And as stated, this is less about Bob Bakish, Paramount, and Showtime overall. Showtime as a platform. This is really less about them and more about how it affects their boxing programming. Moreover, the future of the PBC. We've been hearing reports about belt tightening. We're now hearing reports about consolidation efforts. Economic ones, and what makes sense moving forward. And according to Bob Bakish, it doesn't make sense for Showtime to be a standalone premium cable network anymore. So does this mean that Showtime will be absorbed by Paramount? Select content from Showtime, I should say. What content actually drives subscriptions and brings in viewership? And will the PBC be along for the ride when their viewing figures have steadily declined the last couple of years? What does this mean for Stephan Espinoza, and what does this mean?
What does it mean for the PBC?
Well, according to Stephan, who was tagged to this article, Stephan Espinoza himself said more cards in 2023 than 2022. Is that clear enough?
No, it isn't.
More cards next year than what we saw this year on Showtime could be a byproduct of that many more PBC fighters migrating back over to Showtime once Fox is completely out of the sport. Industry insiders have speculated for the longest time that Fox will not renew with the PBC, and this will be their last year in the sport. So as a result of that, those fighters that you might have been seeing on Fox, like Deontay Wilder and Keith Thurman, they might migrate back over to Showtime, which will then result in more shows, more cards. But the question is, how much is Showtime actually spending on boxing? How much will they be spending? What number of those shows next year are going to be box office shows, pay-per-views? We are now at year's end and at the tail end of the PBC's 4-year deal with Fox, and what we saw in recent years was that Fox would not foot the bill for production costs in order to do shows. In a nutshell, they weren't paying to do the shows. The PBC was still using their platform and the deal was still active, but Fox didn't want to spend any more money on boxing. As a result of that, we saw a proliferation of box office fights, pay-per-views, many of which were not pay-per-view worthy. Like Ruiz versus Areola, more recently like Thurman versus Barrios. After a while, that's the most in terms of content you were getting from Fox. Box office fights, pay-per-views almost exclusively after a while. Now that Fox is rumored to be leaving boxing beyond this year, you see Stephan Espinoza over there at Showtime saying that they're going to do more shows next year on Showtime than they did this year. But how many of those shows are going to be box office shows, box office fights? Are we about to see the same proliferation of pay-per-views on Showtime that we've been seeing on Fox? Because if we are, then that may herald the exact same situation at Showtime that we've been seeing on Fox. In order to limit spending, Fox didn't want to spend any more money on boxing, so the PBC ended up paying the production costs to do these shows out of their own pocket in the hopes that if they build them as pay-per-views, the fans will buy them and they can get their money back. Many of those shows were not pay-per-view worthy. The aforementioned Andy Ruiz versus Chris Areola pay-per-view, the more recent Keith Thurman versus Mario Barrios welterweight contest.
I think about that,
And I think about how Stefan Espinoza is now saying that we're going to see more shows on Showtime next year than we saw this year. And I ask myself, well, how many of those shows are going to be pay-per-views? Because if there's a high abundance of pay-per-views on Showtime, it could herald what we just saw at Fox. It might. And not everything that ends up on pay-per-view is necessarily pay-per-view worthy. At minimum, we know that Gervonta Davis's upcoming fight with Hector Garcia is going to be a box office fight. You have to wonder if the Caleb Plant versus David Benavidez fight is going to be a box office fight. And what about Charlo versus Zoo? Spence versus Thurman is most certainly going to be a box office fight. That's going to be a pay-per-view. How many pay-per-views are we looking at for the coming year on Showtime? Because nobody's staging more pay-per-views these days than the PBC as an outfit and their broadcast partners. Pay-per-views on Fox, pay-per-views on Showtime. And if the majority of these shows that Showtime is going to put on next year end up being pay-per-views, what that could mean is that the PBC may be now doing at Showtime what they were just doing at Fox. More shows doesn't necessarily mean that Showtime is spending more money on boxing. What it could mean is that a large amount of these shows might end up on pay-per-view because they're hoping that the money to pay for those shows to even do them comes from me and you. I've got a lot of fighters to accommodate.
I know the people happy to hear you, man, and great spirit.
You see what's going on with Showtime?
What's happening? What the fuck happening?
With boxing?
Nigga, what's happening? Tell everybody.
That shit damn near over with.
Showtime?
Yeah.
How the fuck?
They talking about Steven Espinoza done. Man, they saying that boxing shit over with Showtime.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah. It's some crazy shit going on, man. We about to be fighting on Twitter. We about to be fighting on Twitter.
Niggas mama's made snot come out my nose, man.
Hey, man.
On Twitter?
Yeah.
Nah, I don't say that. Showtime ain't going through shit like that, man.
Mm-hmm.
I know if anybody knows it's you.
Hell yeah, I know, man. It's getting bad, bro. They can't even promise Earl and Terrence no guarantees. The fuck?
Those sound bites from Adrian Broner are from approximately 2 months ago in October, and since then, he has officially jumped ship. He's left the PBC, he's off the Showtime platform, and he's slated to return in February of next year after signing a 3-fight deal with Black Prime that just aired the Crawford versus Evanesian fight. When asked about the move, Adrian was quoted as saying things slowed up, so it was time for me to move on and do different things. It's a 12-month, 3-fight deal worth a guaranteed 8 figures, upwards of $10 million. His maiden fight, his maiden voyage under the platform, his Black Prime debut, is said to be against Ukrainian journeyman Ivan Redkach, who is all but an outlier these days. He's not doing business with any of the major platforms like DAZN, ESPN, or Showtime. There was some truth to what Adrian Broner was saying 2 months ago. He was right. It's confirmed on both sides. Neither Errol Spence Jr. or Terrence Crawford were set to get any guaranteed cash from Showtime. When describing the ongoing situation over there, the gravity of it behind the scenes, he says that Showtime is in a bad way. He says that boxing on the platform may be all but gone very soon. Where Showtime executive Stefan Espinoza is saying the opposite. We're going to see more cards on Showtime next year. Like I said before, how many of those cards are going to be pay-per-views? How many of those cards are going to be box office fights? Are we about to see at Showtime what we just saw at Fox? And if Showtime really were in a bad way, the way that Adrian Broner says they are, right? Would Stefan Espinoza shout it from the rooftops? Adrian was in attendance this weekend for the Crawford versus Evanesian fight. And this is what he said.
Money is real. You know, we ain't living off promises.
Did somebody at the PBC or Showtime make Adrian Broner empty promises they didn't live up to?
Yeah, overall, I think a lot of the fighters, in general, the thing has been like dates, like and them being consistent. And you kind of alluded with like the promises part. I guess overall, what's your opinion on that? On fighters not being able to be active in this age now?
I'ma just say this, man. Y'all better wake the fuck up, man, because even you young fighters, y'all sitting out a year, 18 months, 24 months out your prime. Like you don't get them years back.
This year, Jaron Boots Ennis, unbeaten up-and-comer Jaron Boots Ennis in the welterweight division, only fought for 4 minutes. He only had one fight this year. So did Caleb Plant. So did David Benavidez. So did Eimantas Stanionis.
So did Gary Russell.
All guys that you regularly see on Showtime.
And some others that you don't.
You don't get them years back. So, just wake up and do what's best for y'all. And that's all I'm going to say. But, there comes a time where it's like, all right, now I fought 18 months ago, and y'all saying I ain't going to fight to another 9 months?
Say it here on the channel all the time. A lot of those fighters over there, they're just not fighting often enough, and it's not conducive towards their growth and development as fighters or their continued success and sharpness.
What the fuck is this? Shh. Hell no, y'all got to wake up, man.
What's going on there? Why is that happening in your...
Adrian's not making this stuff up, What he said about Errol and Crawford not having guarantees, that turned out to be true. What he's talking about here and now, sparse schedules of activity. That's yet another reality that we often address here on the channel.
Adrian has been a disgruntled employee over there at the PBC for some time now, and he's let some things slip out, some nuggets of information. The text message that he sent to Al Heyman demanding that Al Heyman give him the rest of his money.
The outburst he had ahead of what was supposed to be the Omar Figueroa fight, the Omar Figueroa showdown, and how they didn't actually stage a press conference. Instead, they did a Zoom call.
Adrian Broner eventually pulling out of that fight, citing mental health issues, which I never bought. I never believed that. What I believe is that the money that he was offered at that time to take on Conor Benn in the UK was likely more than he stood to make opposite the ring, Omar Figueroa in the US, and based on that, he decided to call that fight off.
Mental fucking health, mental fucking mouth, whatever. It wasn't worth doing.
It's a double-edged sword with Broner, because a lot of what he's saying seems to ring true, though at the same time, has he as a fighter been holding up his end of the bargain in terms of viewership and ticket sales and overall metrics?
He seems to have a lot of expectations that maybe aren't warranted based on where he is in his career right now and how he's been looking fight by fight.
He's been a disgruntled employee and he ain't got no hair on his tongue. He's been vocal about it.
So maybe to Stefan Espinoza and Al Heyman, Broner's a lost cause and he's not worth the money. But don't forget that this is also a fighter who was made a multi-million-dollar offer by Eddie Hearn and DAZN to come to their platform. He's on Black Prime now, who have made him an estimated $10 million.
They've signed him to a multi-million, multi-fight deal.
His ominous forecast of what's really going on at Showtime. I hardly expect Stefan Espinoza, to show everyone all his cards. That if they are in a bad way, I don't think Stefan Espinoza is going to shout it from the rooftops. But according to Adrian Broner, that's what's going on.
And based on what the higher-ups, the people well above Stefan Espinoza's pay grade, based on what they're saying,
which you've been seeing from Bob Backish, which you've been seeing from Jaina Winograde, well, doesn't sound encouraging when it comes to the Showtime brand. Declining viewership, declining subscribership, consolidation, economic consolidation, mergers.
No, usually when there's a merger, people start to lose their jobs.
Because if things were going the way they want them to go, there would be no need for consolidation. There would be no merger.
How do we know that Bob Backish and the higher-ups at Paramount aren't looking to trim the fat, trim the excess, and
the bulk of Showtime subscribership seems to come from their story-based programming, not sports.
They're not DAZN. They're not ESPN.
Look at their metrics. If they've got approximately 33 or 35 million subscribers, less than 1% of their overall subscribership views boxing. So what does that tell you?
At minimum, it tells me that the future is uncertain.
And that uncertainty applies to Adrian Broner as much as it applies to Stefan Espinoza and Showtime, the future of PBC boxing on that platform. Irrespective of what does or doesn't happen with all of that, Adrian Broner is embarking on a new phase, a new chapter of his career that is interpreted by many as being the twilight of it, the tail end of Adrian Broner's career. How much does he really have left to give to the sport? Is the lack of dedication and professionalism that we've been seeing the last few years as a result of him being a disgruntled employee, because now he doesn't have Al Heyman, Stefan Espinoza, or Showtime to blame for anything anymore. He's completely changed his decorum. He's on Black Prime now. He says that the money is real. He's set to debut on the platform in the first quarter of next year opposite the ring, Ivan Redkach, and reportedly, he's set to make a lot of money to fight a guy that ain't got no profile.
I mean, it's all on him now.
So now, are we set to see the focused Broner that we've been hearing about for something like 5 or 6 years? Is that about to happen? Because he ain't got Stefan Espinoza or Al Heyman to blame for anything anymore. You're on a completely different platform, completely changed your decorum, you're set to make a lot of money.
Two things can be true at the same time, you know.
Even if everything Adrian's been describing about the PBC and Showtime's inner workings rings true, that doesn't mean that some portion of his own situation isn't a self-inflicted wound, that he hasn't brought it on himself, that, you know, when it comes to holding up his end of the bargain, he hasn't done that, and that's why he's been treated the way he was treated.
You know, this ain't the Broner from 5 or 6 or 7 years ago.
His buzz, his marquee value, drawing power, isn't what it used to be. He's not the same athlete that he was. Look at how he keeps himself in between fights. At what weight is this contest going to be? This contest with Ivan Redkach? Because most people don't think Adrian Broner can make 140 pounds anymore, and even if he can, the way he looks between fights, I don't think he wants to.
And what's the future of Black Prime in the sport of boxing when so far all you got is Adrian Broner, Ivan Redkach, I saw Tevin Farmer.
So all these guys in attendance for Terrence Crawford's fight this past weekend, we also saw Mickey Bay. These are the outliers in the sport right now.
Familiar faces, yes, but not big marquee attractions, not big draws. What is Black Prime's future in the sport when this is the most they have in terms of a stable, and what kind of content can they shell out using these guys?
Broner versus Redkach on Black Prime, or Broner versus Redkach on Showtime. Either platform. Is that a hot ticket?
Tevin Farmer and Mickey Bay were supposed to be doing their own fight abroad, overseas. I believe it was on the African continent. And for whatever reason, logistics issues, what have you, the fight didn't materialize. It didn't happen. Is it going to happen on Black Prime? And even if it does,
Is that supposed to be a hot ticket?
based on what familiar faces are popping up on the Black Prime side of things, it seems more like an orphanage.
For orphan fighters that have fractured relationships and have since parted ways with their longtime handlers. That's what it looks like.
An orphanage.
A hospice for the careers of fighters who are in the twilight stages of their careers. That's how it reads. That's what it looks like. What it don't look like is longevity.
Remember, the Crawford situation with Black Prime was a one-and-done kind of situation, a one-time deal. He's not actually tied to the platform the same way that Broner is.
3-fight deal in excess of $10 million, $12 million, or whatever it is. Who are they going to get Adrian Broner to fight for 3 fights?
It's a question.